And by 2011, it was worth over $1 billion. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Money with Min. Today, we're going to talk about not only how you can become a Roth millionaire, but theoretically, how you can become a Roth billionaire. So before we get started, I want to thank you all for getting me to 500 subscribers last week. It's a huge milestone for me because working on this channel, making these videos has been such a rewarding passion project for me. So every little bit of support definitely means a lot. So if you're new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. But either way, hit that like button, consider subscribing if you want to see more content about personal finance, investing, and building your wealth. So as you can see here, we're going to cover an article from ProPublica. Why is that so hard to say? ProPublica. So this article is labeled Lord of the Roths, How Tech Mogul Peter Thiel Turned a Retirement Account for the Middle Class into a $5 billion tax-free piggy bank. Now, if you aren't familiar with who Peter is, what's relevant to this story is Peter is a huge investor and founder in the tech space. Most namely for this story, he was a founder of PayPal alongside Elon Musk. Now, when I first saw the title of this article being Lord of the Roths, I was curious, but it turns out that Peter Thiel is a huge Lord of the Rings fan, and he has a family trust called the Rivendell Trust, which is where he was able to buy and sell what was needed for this Roth IRA. So how did he turn a Roth IRA, which most of us have access to, by the way, into a $5 billion account? And how he pulled this off was actually super genius. This is what he did. In 1999, over 21 years ago, he put $2,000 into his Roth IRA. And for most people like you and me, putting $2,000 in your Roth IRA is quite a bit. If you fast forward to today's dollars, the maximum you can put in every year is about $6,000. So $2,000 for a multimillionaire at the time was probably not a lot. And according to national stats, the average worth of a Roth IRA for the average American citizen today is about $39,000. Compare that to $5 billion for Peter Thiel. And a reminder, the Roth IRA is a great vehicle to avoid taxes on the back end because all the growth in your Roth IRA is completely tax-free. And remember that piece of information because that's a huge element of the story. And the genius thing that Peter Thiel decided to do was to open a Roth with less than $2,000 in 1999. And he was able to buy private stock of PayPal to put in that Roth IRA. And why does he do that? It's because he was able to pay for pennies on the dollar per share for PayPal, which is quite a lot now. And remember, the key within a Roth IRA is no matter how much the IRA grows, how much growth, no matter how many gains, all that money is completely tax-free. It's protected from tax for the rest of your life as long as you withdraw it in the proper time frame, most likely in your retirement. I also like in this article that there's other anecdotes of billionaires pulling off the same exact thing, with Ted Weschler here working at Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway, $264 million in his Roth IRA, and even the famous Warren Buffett himself, a measly $20.2 million in his Roth IRA. So here's a cool visual on the concept of how this works. So let's take this IRA and let's say you contribute $1,000 to your Roth IRA. And with that $1,000, some select individuals, especially those that work in Wall Street and in business, they have access to private shares of companies before they go public on the stock market. So in this example, let's say you're able to buy 1 million shares of a company at a fraction of a penny each for that $1,000. And when the company goes public, the price of that share goes to $50. And now your Roth IRA is suddenly worth $50 million because you bought those shares at fractions of a penny. And since all this activity and all these transactions and these gains happen within your Roth, these are completely tax-free gains. I can't emphasize that enough. That's the important magic of a Roth IRA. And now with that $50 million worth of investment sitting with your Roth IRA, you can buy and sell shares of other companies, other investments using that $50 million, and none of that is taxed as well. And with this amount of capital in your Roth IRA, you can continue to invest in other companies. And as those stocks grow in value, your Roth IRA can grow to infinite amounts. Again, tax-free. And the general rule for Roth IRAs is that you can't touch this money until you're 59 and a half, which Peter Thiel is about 6 years away from. So he's gonna have $5 billion plus, probably more than that by the time he retires, all tax-free in his later years. There are some techniques on how to access this money before you're 59, and I'll talk about that in a future video. I'll share the link to this article in the description below, but this has a great visual that shows the growth of his account compared to a standard S&P 500 Roth IRA account. So this is going over time, and you can see immediately that jump, right? So his IRA starts off at less than $2,000, as I mentioned before. Let's say a standard $2,000 S&P 500 Roth IRA. Look how fast this jumps even in the first year, right? Because of the stock value of PayPal, this skyrocketed. And I'll scroll one more time and we'll see how fast that goes. This is increasing exponentially. So by 1 year later, this Roth IRA gross would be worth over $1 million in just under a year, compared to like the pretty standard growth of a standard human being's Roth IRA. Now, as I keep scrolling, you can see the insane growth of this over the years. And I'll continue scrolling a bit faster here. The article is great, so feel free to read it later. And by 2010, his Roth IRA was worth over $500 million. And by 2011, it was worth over $1 billion. And this data ends actually at 2019. So if you're thinking about 2021, Peter Thiel probably has way more than that in his Roth IRA based on the growth that we've seen in the market just in the past few years. Now, while the magnitudes of Peter Thiel's fortune in his Roth IRA is not achievable for any of us watching this video, however, the concepts and mechanics of Roth IRAs are still important to each and every one of us. I've talked about Roth IRAs in several videos, so I'll link them either up here or down below in the description. But definitely take the time to learn how to apply a Roth IRA to your own personal finances. Remember, a Roth IRA is such a great vehicle to save for retirement, to save on taxes, to save for the future. So if you don't have one today, definitely consider opening one up. If you learned something new today, give this video a like. Let me know in the comments below if you already have a Roth IRA, and are you working towards maxing it out anytime soon if you haven't done so already. That does it for this video, and if you want to see more content about how to save for the future, how to invest intelligently, and overall, how to get wiser with your money, definitely consider subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.